The concept of management is an approach that looks at both the supply side and the demand side. We crystallize it into 6 words. Water for all, which captures the supply side, conserve, value, enjoy, the demand side. Yeah, so it's a holistic approach that try and look at water holistically. So water for all is our supply strategy, which we call 4 national taps. So the idea is to not just rely on a single source for water, but to have diversified sources of water to ensure that we can sustainably support Singapore's growth and development well into the future. And those are the 4 sources, and I'll elaborate a little bit afterwards. Then on the other side, Professor Gillian talked about 3P in NTU's context. There are lots of 3Ps. In our context, 3P is really the idea of partnership between the public, the private, and the people sector. So the idea of engaging the community, engaging business to be joint stewards or joint stakeholders of water. And we go beyond just conserving. Conserving is a big part of it, of course. But the idea is, as our minister said when he first joined us, move away from the siege mentality. In fact, today we don't have the siege mentality anymore, but really to see water as an asset, as an environmental asset, and I'll talk about it later on in the ABC Waters program. So the 3P approach is again a kind of holistic one where we don't just look at one aspect, conserving water, but to try and get the community to be joint stakeholders in water. So that's in 6 words really sums up the PUB water management strategy. So let me talk about the supply side. 4 national taps. Now, as I said, we have 2.4 meters of rain that falls into Singapore. So of course, since the early days, the challenge has been how can we try and harvest every single drop of that rain that falls on Singapore. Now, the original catchment area, water engineers' idea of water catchment and reservoir. Water must not be polluted, so it falls into a nature area. You collect the pristine water in the reservoir, and that's your water supply. To the traditional water engineer, you do not want to collect water from urban areas because they are polluted. But we had no choice, so we had to experiment with collecting water from urban areas. So even in the early 70s and 80s, we already moved into what we call unprotected catchments. In other words, when we were developing the new towns, the HDB new towns, we set out developing them with the idea that we want to collect all the water from these towns. So we designed the drainage and the sewage or the used water network to be completely separate so that drains are only for rain, collect only rainwater. The used water network basically is used water. So sewer up everything, put in strict land use and environmental controls, only non-pollutive industries, light industries, and so on. So a lot of the unprotected catchments, therefore, have been our HDB new towns where the water people, PUB, and URA, the planners, and HDB work very closely together at Ministry of Environment to make sure that we could collect that water. I mean, we were not sure what the outcome was, so the first few reservoirs, there were issues and problems, but I think over the years, reservoirs like Bedok, Kranji, Pandan, they're all urban reservoirs. They collect water from where people live, from urban areas. In fact, today, half of Singapore is a water catchment, all those yellow areas. So over the years, I think we have really become probably the only city or country in the world with urban stormwater harvesting on the scale that we do. Something that is not very commonly known, but really, I don't think there's anybody else in the world that does urban stormwater harvesting the way we do it. So we were, of course, emboldened, and partly also Minister Mentor Lee Kuan Yew is always challenging the water people. So in 1987, when the Singapore River was cleaned up, he said, okay, in 20 years' time, I want you guys to dam up, form the Marina Barrage, turn that into a reservoir. At that time, technology was still not available, but he you should read this. One of the videos I would like to show, maybe not now, but maybe if your one can see. He actually said it on TV, that in 20 years' time, and this was in 1987, the technology would be there, for us to turn Marina into a reservoir. So of course, we, like good civil servants, told the line. So 2007, we opened Marina Reservoir. So we have Marina Barrage. In fact, we are planning not just Marina Barrage. The green areas represent Ponggol and Serangoon. In fact, right now, we are building Ponggol and Serangoon reservoirs. So today, we have 14 reservoirs in operation. With Marina Reservoir, right, it is now in the end stages of desalting, so it's not quite in operation yet. That's our 15th reservoir. Then Ponggol and Serangoon, 16, 17. So we will have 17 reservoirs. And if you look at all the colors, brown, yellow, and green, it's 2/3 of Singapore. So 2/3 of Singapore in 2 years' time, when the three new reservoirs are fully operational, will be water catchment. Okay? And that's why you begin to appreciate why this second part of the strategy is so important, that community involvement, because we want to get the message out to people that most of us are living in the water catchment. So the rain that falls goes into the drains, goes to the reservoir. We all have a responsibility to try and keep the water clean. So Marina Barrage then was an opportunity for us. I mean, Marina Barrage was actually created not for the purpose of a reservoir. Actually, it was created to prevent flooding. Singapore River, lower parts of the city. Some of you who live in Mountbatten, Goodman Road areas, you all know, when it's high tide, you know, those areas can flood because of the sea. So the barrage was really to hold the sea back so that we prevent flooding. But of course, in addition to a barrage, it can also be a dam and store water. And that's why we are fond of saying Marina Barrage is 3 in 1. You know, it achieves 3 objectives. Number 1, water storage. Number 2, flood control. And number 3, you know, to create a beautiful freshwater lake in the city. And that part, I think the engineers in PUB didn't quite appreciate. It needed URA to prop PUB, you know, because the original design of the barrage, which of course now everybody looks at it and say, wow, including all the people in PUB, was probably a typical, not NTU engineer graduate design, but typical box, you know, with all the pumps, because it was just a building for a pump house. So engineers being very functional, I got the design, optimal, low cost, blah, blah, blah. It was a straightforward square building. Then of course URA, you know, say, look, this is right in the heart of the city. You have an opportunity to create an icon for the city. So PUB took up the challenge, and then at about that same time, we were beginning to rethink our whole approach to community engagement. So we saw that as a great opportunity. So today, Marina Barrage is you know, not just an engineering showcase, but I think it's also an icon for the city. I think many people have visited it, go there for picnics and so on. Okay, so that's about stormwater harvesting. Very important source of supply. But as you can imagine, given our limited land, and although we now have 17 reservoirs, and of course there are plans for more, you know, especially with more land reclamation and so on and so forth, but there is really a limit. Ultimately, there is a limit. And that's why new water becomes so important. So the breakthrough in new water really came of about 1998. We did a study because at that point in time, membrane technology had reached a point where it was becoming economic to use membrane for large-scale water treatment. And some places in the US, Orange County in California in particular, were already doing it on the fairly sizable scale. They call it Water Factory 21. So PUB decided then, okay, we will go and study what they do. The team came back and said, yes, this is something we can do. So they actually put up a pilot plant, tried it for 2 or 3 years, tested it, and then of course the question was asked to PUB, you know, can you do this? You know, and I think PUB people were pretty confident. They said, we can scale this up, we can do this. And so in 2002, 2003, we really rolled out the new water program in a large way, built the first 3 new water plants in Bedok, Kranji, and Seletar.